Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. It is I, once again, the notorious RMB, here on a noontime, high noon. I don't think Gary Cooper is waiting around for anyone to get off a train, but I'm not either. Anyway, it is still high noon. Welcome to all of you. These, the members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity. How are you today? First of all, as you all know, Robservations is now brought to you by, I love saying that. I don't think I've said that yet. Brought to you by Lucky Tiger men's grooming products. I love saying that. I love saying that. So good. As people know, I've become a big fan of Lucky Tiger grooming products, and there's something sad. So this Suds for Studs soap that they make, they sent me, by the way. I went to the website. Apparently, you cannot buy this on their website. It might be a discontinued product. I've heard you can get it on eBay. I'm like, eBay? So in addition to you people that have been writing Alan Murphy, the CEO of Lucky Tiger, emails to get him to come on the 100th episode of this show, which is rapidly coming up, we now have to start a campaign to bring the Studs for Suds soap back because it's awesome, it's peppermint, and I love it. So we have to continue. Just keep writing him at getluckytiger.com or at clubluckytiger.com. Send letters to Alan Murphy, the CEO of Lucky Tiger. Tell him not only should he come on the 100th episode of this show, but why did they discontinue Suds for Studs soap? Because I love it so. Anyway, can you believe it? We're up to what is this? The 89th episode of this show, the 89th. I mean, that's insane. And I couldn't do it without all of you. So thank you all for being here. Once again, I used to look, I always was looking for topics for these conversations. I'm like, what am I going to talk about today? But then I realized all I have to do is look to my inbox, look to the inbox on the Burnettwork.net. All we have to do is look there, and my God, do topics just flow in. Now, while there are a lot of you might think that I'm playing favorites because I keep reading a lot of people's, the same letters from the same people, but it's only because those letters are great and I love them. That doesn't mean I don't read all the letters. And let me start out. The first thing I'm going to read today is from Jim Long, who always sends me nice letters. Zombie Dad. Jim Long, Zombie Dad. This was just a quick one. All he did was send me a quote. He said, quote of the day: find something you're passionate about and keep tremendously interested in it. Julia Child said that, which seemed pertinent to today's conversation. So thank you for that, Joe, Zombie Dad. I appreciate your daily missives and all of those things. Keep them coming. I also wanted to read something because all everybody is doing now is speculating about Endgame, Avengers Endgame. So why shouldn't we? So here's a quick letter from Paul in Long Beach, C. Sorry, I'm coughing because I just ate some cashews. Paul in Long Beach, C says, hey, Rob, as you and I are the same age, I'd appreciate a conversation about the 70s and 80s animation and its importance to the products we consume today. I wasn't a spinner rack kid myself, but the Super Friends and Batman 66, even the Marvel cartoons, were everyday viewing for me as a young child. For example, I see a ton of Plastic Man and Deadpool. Once technology caught up to imagination, we obtained true post-geek singularity. Also, I'd like to postulate another theory on why we don't see Stark on the Benatar. The cockpit is a two-story structure. Drax and Gamora were below in the Infinity War introduction. Perhaps he and Lang are in fact sitting below the sightline. Never thought about that, Paul in Long Beach C. Thank you for that. I like that. Lastly, I'm going to be pouring one out, a touch of popcorn, in honor of Schnepp. Make it a sweaty moment. Thanks, Paul. Paul, I love that idea. Schnepp would love that you're pouring out some popcorn for him in the theater. I don't think the janitors will later, but I think it's important. I think I'm going to do that too. It's going to be weird. I saw Infinity War sitting right next to the big guy, and he's not here now, so that's going to be sad. But really interesting what Paul brings up is that, yes, in the 70s when I was a kid, a lot of people forget that the first iteration of Super Friends, and I was a huge Justice League fan, so the Super Friends were my jam, had Wendy and Marvin and their dog, Wonder Dog. I think it was Wonder Dog. And they had hour-long episodes. And I remember Plastic Man, both Plastic Man and The Flash guested. They had the geek computer. In Plastic Man, there was a mouse inside, and Plastic Man had to use his hands to get that. But I think that Cartoons of the 70s, Johnny Quest was a hugely influential comic, animated show for me. And that was like a prime time, like the Flintstones, it was a prime time animated show. And I still think, if you guys haven't seen Johnny Quest, one of the great theme songs of all time. And I'll still never forget the Robot Spy episode with the giant one-eyed spider. Man, I love that when I was a kid. So yes, I do think that the animation, science fiction animation of the 70s and superhero animation of the 70s was hugely important. That is, of course, when the animated Star Trek came out, and I don't think that stuff is talked about enough. So you're right there. That's something I'll revisit later. But I really, there's a couple more letters that I really want to get to. And the first is from Norman Lau. Norman is, I've known Norman now for a while. I met him, I think, because of Axanar, through the Axanar project. And he's a very smart guy and a big fan. And we tend to like the same things. I don't know why that is. I don't know why do people gravitate toward the same things, but we do like the same things. Norman does a Babylon 5 podcast. You should check it out. I don't remember what it's called right now. I don't know if it's like the Zocalo or something like that. Or that's an NPR podcast. But anyway, I really like what Norman had to say. He's always sending me these letters. He's always waking up with these great fan topics to discuss that I find irresistible. So when he writes them up, what can I do but read them to you? Here we go. This is from Norman Lau. Do we compromise too much of our own fandom beliefs to keep the social media backlash at bay? I mean, come on. You had me at social media backlash at bay. Hey, Rob. Yes, another letter from me. And I apologize to your fans who may think I'm trying to monopolize your time, because I am, laugh out loud. But seriously, I just returned from attending a memorial service for my good friend who just recently lost his dad after a long illness with a brain condition. In attending the service, I learned one of the greatest lessons of life itself and how this man lived every day of his life. His surviving children, his daughter and his son, my close friend, described their dad as being unique and a spirit that could not be categorized, labeled, or placed in a box because of one very important reason, a reason that I think we all need to deeply examine about ourselves. That reason was simply, he lived the absolute truth about himself, and within that absolute truth came honesty, happiness, and an optimism about the world that his children and his wife found almost supernatural. So how does this relate to this group and your friends? Well, I believe that as a whole, because of the delicate nature of fandom out there and the increasingly hair-trigger sensitivity of much of today's fandom, I feel that many of us feel like we need to compromise what we believe is our honest opinions and truthful feelings when it comes to social media conversation, deliberation, and debate. And that really made me think deeply about my beliefs and my life and what I find important and what honesty that I bring to this post-geek singularity. In this compromise, we do so because we know that the repercussions no longer favor discussion or dialogue. They are only met with vitriol and repercussion. In Babylon 5, as Rob knows, is my all-time favorite series, the two most powerful forces at work are ideals, not powers or governments. The questions of who are you versus what do you want resonate with us as sentient beings so deeply, it's almost as if they're a part of our human condition, this experiment in human evolution. But I could clearly see in this man, this dearly departed soul, that he lived a life of great measure and stature, not because he was wealthy or famous. He lived a great life because he knew who he was and what he wanted. And that was simply to be the most truthful, honest, and real person he could be. And that was enough. And I think it is important in being ambassadors of this post-geek singularity that we remain truthful and honest, and especially real about our fandoms, positive in the messages that we put forth in the perpetually tumultuous seas of social media, and always challenge that which we feel rings untrue, insincere, or abusive. If we can't stay honest and positive and truthful about what we love and our fandoms in this shared public social media space, then where do we go from here? Once again, thank you for your consideration in reading my letter, Rob. Norm. Again, a fantastic letter, a letter that brings up a lot of questions. I mean, I have never been accused of not being honest about my fandoms. I've been accused of being dishonest about other things, but certainly not about my fandoms and what it is that I've loved. Because I've loved them since I was a kid, they really haven't changed or evolved. I was just talking to my mom on the phone. I said, Mom, get ready. We're 2 days away from your debut on that YouTube, the newfangled that those interwebs. My mom's actually a little nervous. I mean, there are some people like Willow Yang. I will not put Willow Yang on the spot, knowing what I know, knowing what she shared with us. I will not expect her to come live on this show and have me fire off questions at her. That wouldn't be fair. But my mom, heck yeah. My mom is a little nervous. She doesn't really understand. I try and explain to her. I say, hey, we got people from India, from Iraq, from Sweden, from the UK, from Germany, from Canada, all over the world, Mom. And they're going to talk to you. I said, you don't have to look at them face to face, but they're going to want to know what you say. And I said, just be honest. I mean, the point is you fostered this environment for me as a kid that allowed me to develop these interests that never went away. And I'm like, that's all you have to talk about. And she's like, yeah, but you haven't lived at home for 30 years. I said, I know, Mom, but that doesn't change the fact that, I said to her, I go, Mom, what did the tooth fairy bring me when I was a kid? It's certainly the tooth fairy didn't put money under my pillow. And she's like, no, you got the latest Mego superhero or Star Trek figure. I go, yeah, my tooth fairy brought me action figures, Mom. I don't think any other kid in the history of kids got action figures from the tooth fairy the way that I did. And I'm like, that wasn't because of me. I don't know, but did you call the tooth fairy? Like, did you talk to her? Maybe it was a him. I don't know. I don't want to be discriminatory. I don't understand the hiring practices of tooth fairy. So far be it for me to say, I mean, I know if you read the book by Robert Devereaux, one of the greatest Christmas books you'll ever read, Santa Steps Out. In that book, Santa Claus is actually having an affair with the tooth fairy that has monstrous repercussions for all of creation. But that's another story for another day. But, so my mom is very excited to talk about these things. And I said, Mom, you're responsible. You and Dad are responsible for this fandom that has been instilled in me because you provided an environment that was non-judgmental and you supported that. And she's like, well, you've always been that way. And by the way, that's a terrible impression of my mother. But it's true. So I sort of, it's because of my mom that I've been nothing but, I wear my fandom on my sleeve and it's worked for me sometimes. It's not worked for me at other times. And I think overall, perhaps if I was less of a fan, I would be further along in my career. Even though I'm pretty far along in my life, I'm still out there swinging. Like this morning, I was on the phone with Steve Yeaman, who is our sound designer for Tango Shalom. And we're in the midst of that, setting all that up, beginning that. It's pretty exciting. So anyway, but before I go more deeper into this idea, I got another letter from our favorite letter writer from Canada, Miss Willow Yang, PhD candidate, molecular biologist, user of E. coli bacteria. She wrote me another letter. And how can I not want to read a letter from Willow Yang? Because she's kind of like the Albert Einstein of letter writers for at least Robservations. Certainly, maybe she's Noam Chomsky, or maybe she's any one of these futurists I used to read, like Alvin Toffler, who used to write those books, Future Shock. Used to love that, like the first Future Shock that came out. I think it was like 79 or 80. I was like, I got to read a book called Future Shock. It was a little bit beyond me. But anyway, here's a letter, the latest letter from Willow Yang. Greetings, Rob. This time, I would like to share with you the story of the years of warfare that I've had with my parents over my love of gaming. As I've mentioned in my previous letters, my parents weren't particularly supportive of my geeky interest, viewing them as a waste of precious time. When we first immigrated to Canada, however, there was a span of several years where they didn't actually mind me watching movies or reading novels because they believed it would help improve my English. It wasn't until high school when I foolishly told them that I wanted to become a novelist did they grow more concerned about those hobbies. Games, however, were just a no-go from the get-go. When I was in elementary school, Pokemon was all the rage. I loved the show and I wanted to play the game more than anything else. My parents wouldn't allow me to have a Game Boy. I did eventually manage to rent one from a classmate for $2 a day. Unfortunately, just having a Game Boy wasn't enough. I had to find a way to play the darn game without my parents catching me. Playing in my room wasn't safe. There was no lock on my door, and my stay at home mom would often burst in unannounced. Playing in the washroom didn't work either. There's only so much time you can spend in there before someone is banging on the door demanding, "Why the hell you're taking so long?" And I couldn't claim to be constipated all the time. I turned on the taps and pretending that I was taking a shower, but my mom got suspicious after she noticed that my hair wasn't wet coming out. In the end, I resorted to playing mostly on the bus to and from school and during recesses and lunch breaks. Sadly, I ran out of money and had to return the Game Boy before I was able to catch them all. I played online games in high school, including Maple Story, Adventure Quest, and Neopets. Yes, I admit it. I played Neopets. The one game that I really got addicted to, however, was RuneScape. In case you aren't familiar with RuneScape, it's a multiplayer role-playing game that's pretty much a poor man's Warcraft. I mean this literally, since you have to pay to play Warcraft, and I had little money and no credit card at the time. Although RuneScape did have a paying members option, their free-to-play version was sufficient to keep me engaged for a few years. My main account was a warrior named Batar Saiken. Batar, I guess it's Batar Saiken? Batar Saiken? Please don't ask why. I just thought the name was cool when I was 13. I like Batar. That's a cool name. I spent so many hours of my high school life fishing for lobsters, which was the best method for FTP players to earn money. F2P, is that something to peer players to earn money? See, this is where my age comes into play. F2P players to earn money. Now, back then, we only had one computer at home, and that was in the living room. It wasn't long before my parents became aware that I wasn't just writing essays and doing research for school like I claimed I was. I had to get sneaky. Gaming became like watching porn, which I did also get in trouble for, but that's a story for another day. Initially, I'd just have a Word document or a half-finished essay open, which I would switch to whenever my parents entered the room. They quickly caught on, however, and would demand to see my toolbar to find out what else I had open. Your parents were smart. The only way to avoid getting caught was closing the game, which was devastating if I was in the middle of a quest or a fight. I learned to clear my internet history the proper way. You see, you can't just delete everything in your history folder. That'll look suspicious. You have to go through each individual file and manually remove the incriminating ones. In spite of my best precautions, however, I still got caught a number of times. There was a lot of screaming and tears. I used to hold a lot of resentment toward my parents for being unsupportive of my hobbies. The worst fights we ever had were over my love of gaming and my dreams of becoming a novelist. I've never had a PlayStation or an Xbox. Hearing you talking about games like Uncharted the other day did bum me out a little. I was reminded of how I salivated over games like God of War and Final Fantasy when I was in high school, how I watched videos of other people playing those games just so I could live vicariously through them. Nowadays, I'm simply too busy with work to play. Nevertheless, I'm still grateful to my parents for what they have done for me. I don't know where I'd be right now if they hadn't been so strict about my grades. Would I have gotten into university or be doing a PhD? I currently don't plan on having children of my own. Please don't tell my parents that. But I do wonder what approach I'd have taken. While I certainly don't want to deny them the joys of imagination and fantasy, I don't want them to become trash, as my parents would say in Chinese, either. I wonder, what would you have done? What the members of our community who do have children are doing? How do we be responsible geek parents? Yours sincerely, Willow. Man, I love these letters, Willow. They are so evocative. One day I want to put the Burnettwork on some kind of a paying basis where I can actually pay people to write content. I would certainly love for you to write some of these things, or maybe I'll just appropriate your letters and put them up because they're so good. But anyway, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, and to all of you, I mean, according to your parents, your fandom, your love of this stuff, um, was a waste of time. And I heard that from a lot of my friends. I was like, I don't understand. Like, how is it a waste of time? Like my parents, I was reminding my mother in the fourth grade. I went to my parents and I said, because when you're 10, you don't have any money. And your parents, basically, I got enough allowance where I could pedal to the corner store and maybe pick up a paperback book or a couple of candy bars or whatever. I mean, you didn't really need money when you were a kid. And I wasn't a spoiled kid. I didn't ask for everything in the world, but I just wanted very specific things, and that's all I wanted. That was it. I if I looked through the Sears catalog, there was like very specific things I wanted. I didn't want everything, and I'm kind of that way today. I want very specific things. People are like, "Well, you should collect Funko Pops." I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm only into six scale figures." It's kind of like a Rick. It's not Rick Masters. He's the counterfeiter, but Richard Chance in in William Friedkin's one of my favorite movies from the '80s, To Live and Die in L.A. He says once to his girlfriend that he's out on parole, that she's out on parole, and he's totally using her as an informant. He treats her like trash. Really, I'll admit it. Even though I love his character, he's an asshole, an unrepentant asshole, and she's trying to get him to. She knows something about diamonds, and he tells her, "I'm only interested in Play-Doh," and flicks her hair. I'm kind of like him. I'm only interested in six scale figures. It's either hardcover omnibuses, spaceships of any kind. I mean, I'll buy diecast or models, and six scale figures. That's all I'm interested in. And when I was a kid, I was kind of that way too. I had very specific interests. I didn't like everything. But it was interesting to see other kids' parents who discouraged their love of this stuff. And I don't know why. Like I think my parents, I mean, they never, because of my love of Star Trek and the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits and all these things, I would go to the library and I would bring home stacks of books. I would bring home stacks of books about strange phenomenon. I think I've talked about it before. I read any book I could in the library about UFOs or the Bermuda Triangle or spontaneous human combustion, whatever I could find. I was reading these books, when I was like 8. And my parents loved the fact that I would ride my bike to the library, and then I would get on the bus and go to the bookstore and pick up books I'd ordered. And then when I was 10, I asked my parents to enroll me in the science fiction book club, and they paid for the books, which were $3 or $4 a month, unless I got more than one. Or sometimes normally you'd have book club edition books, but when they had like art books, like the Art of Star Wars, when that came out, they had the original hardcover. Unless I never saw the Art of Star Wars in hardcover in a bookstore, but when it would show up and it was like $9 or $12 or something, like I'm like, I'm gonna sneak in an art book on my folks this weekend or this month. They would pay and they didn't say anything. I guess they were just happy I was buying books, but I was so into it that my parents were like, oh, and they saw how these interests, that when I was into it, I would have to read all about it and find out what was going on. And like when the World Book Encyclopedia salesman would come to the door trying to sell us a World Book Encyclopedia, I begged. We were a World Book family. And I know they're kind of like, I'm a Coke guy. And I understood that Encyclopedia Britannica was like Coke and the World Book was Pepsi. But, I just thought World Book was cooler than Encyclopedia Britannica. It sounded so academic. But I was like, World Book Encyclopedia is cooler. So my parents, I mean, it was not cheap. It was like, back in the day, it was like I don't even remember, but it was hundreds of dollars to get an encyclopedia set. And that day was like, it was like finding Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat or something. It was amazing to get the World Book Encyclopedia, because I was one of those kids that all I did was the encyclopedia, man. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough. So I was lucky. But I always found it interesting that I knew a lot of parents not as maybe strict as yours and not as academically minded. By the way, of course, that's now the Chinese parents, being the way your Chinese parents were, have obviously become a stereotype for the proper reasons, because Chinese moms and dads are that way. They stress excellence, they stress education, they stress good grades, which is actually a good thing. I mean, in the long run, as you so eloquently put it in your letter. But I've always thought it was strange that, look, I understand, like, for an older generation or people that don't understand that gaming has any kind of value. I think it actually does have value, because in order to get into a game, like with me, when I was playing Uncharted, I was so immersed in the story that was being told. And sure, the game mechanics are always interesting, but your mind is totally engaged. Like think about all the different kinds of things that you need to be doing with your brain while you're pursuing these goals. I mean, you have to remember the battlefields that you're on. You have to remember where things are. You have to remember to watch how much ammo you've got. You have to watch your health meter. I mean, your brain playing these games are quite engaged. Now, in the long run, is that going to help you maybe as much as setting up a lemonade stand and making a few shekels for your time over the weekend? Perhaps not, but it does teach you how to think on your feet. There's always, as far as fandom is concerned, the question that I asked, and look, it was clickbaity. I know. It was a clickbaity headline. Is fandom a waste of time? I don't think it is. As a matter of fact, I think it's just the opposite. I think my fandom has led me to be interested in the world. But the difference is, I think the one thing that I might have had that was different than what other kids had is that I wanted to go out into the world. I wanted to go have adventures in real life. I mean, I would stay home and watch my shows and read my books and all that. I mean, I talk about the time I went and had to get the book Revenge of the Manitou when I ordered it because I had to read it. And then I rode the bus home after I picked up Revenge of the Manitou and sat in my room until it was finished. My dad's like, "It's Saturday. Aren't you going to go do anything?" And I'm like, "No, man. I had to know what McCormack and the rest of his Indian medicine men were going to do." And until I was done, I wasn't going to leave. I read Graham Atherton's Revenge of the Manitou because I'd seen the first one. I didn't actually read the first book. I couldn't get the first book. It was harder to get, but I got I got Revenge of the Manitou first, and then I read that, and then I went back and read the Manitou, and then of course the third book, Burial, which bothered me that it didn't have a Manitou title. Then there was like Manitou Blood, and all that. So I was really into it, but I had a social life. I was a really social kid. I mean, I was involved in Indian Guides, then Webelos and Cub Scouts, and did all that. I never went into Boy Scouts because then it got too serious, and I was a little older and I was working at video stores. I probably should have gone and been an Eagle Scout too, but I want girls. There weren't a lot of girls in Boy Scouts at the time, so I've always been a fan of the ladies, and that was you had to have some pitter patter to get girls to talk to you, and I learned all that from Captain Kirk. I just meant you can be anything you want to be. I loved how he talked to Marlena Moreau in the Mirror Universe. I'm like, that's the way to be, or even Khan. Even Khan, when he's talking to Marla McGivers, and you could say, okay, he gets Marla McGivers down on her knees, holding her fist, and then he says, "Go or stay, but do it because it is what you wish to do." I'm like, yeah, that's the way to be, man. What do women want? You got to find out what they want and let them do that thing. My parents were luckily that way, but I really believe that fandom is ultimately not a waste of time. And I think it leads you to do great things. And it's just a question of, like anything else, it's a question of balance. You don't want to get too sucked in. Like I believe what we have seen, the toxicity and the vitriol that, whether it was the Sad and Rabid Puppies as far as the Hugo Awards go, or whether it was Gamergate, I think there's an imbalance in people, especially in the fan community, that there's not enough real life mixed in. Not to go back to lines that we wrote for Free Enterprise, but when Shatner says you have to mix a little reality in with your imagination, that was sort of the whole point of the movie that we were trying to make, is that it's a balance, is that you should use your fandom to inform the way you're going to lead your real life. Because living vicariously, the thing is, when you're a fan of other people's work, and I used to get in these long debates with Mark Altman. I used to say to him, I'm like, don't you believe that your fandom, that you are a fan, so don't you think that you have an obligation to then give back to the fan community by creating something, by using your fandom to create something new and original? And I really believe that. And I don't think that Mark believed that so much, but I certainly did. I was a firm believer that we have to use our fandom to give back. And I've been trying that my whole life. I mean, at first, there wasn't a lot I could do. So working at a video store was a way to share my film fandom with other people. Even though I was 16 and recommending pornographic movies to people, because a third of our stock was pornographic movies. And I didn't like pornographic movies. It was like 10 I had seen, so I could recommend them. They were the 10 best. Who are we kidding? But it was something that I always used my fandom, and also used it in a social way. I was lucky in that regard. And I think what's interesting is a lot of our online communities have allowed our fandom to develop a social aspect of it. Unfortunately, that social aspect tends to be very insular. And I think that um, there needs to be a concerted effort to, again, to really mix real life in with fandom. And that's what's so great about Comic-Con. I mean, I've been going to Comic-Con for, this will be my 31st year at San Diego Comic-Con, and watching it grow and change and evolve over more than a quarter century, and watching it go from being a bunch of guys flipping through long boxes to what it's become now, a celebration of all pop culture with all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, men, women, non-binary, gentle folk, whatever, aliens, it doesn't matter. Everybody's sort of welcome at Comic-Con. Everybody has a smile on their face. You see multi-generations of families there, and it's very social. You go to talk to people and meet other fans. That was always my experience of fandom, is that it was a very social thing. So in my mind, fandom has always been great. I mean, the weird toxicity that sort of developed around fandom because of the internet is strange to me. I look, I've always had knockdown, drag out battles about science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I mean, I was the only kid in my neighborhood that liked the Justice League. Everyone else was an Avengers fan. And I was like, no, and I to be honest, I didn't read much of the Avengers. There's no way some idiot named Silver Surfer was more powerful than Superman. Like, what, Silver Surfer? That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Then, of course, I came across Kirby's The Black Racer. He's on skis. Although I thought skiing was way cooler than surfing. So imagine those debates. But yeah, fandom has always had an element. We still loved each other at the end of the day. It was all ribbing. But now the vitriol that people have, it's different. But I understand. I mean, those beloved franchises now, especially Star Wars and Star Trek, again, like I've talked about a lot, they're owned by corporate interests. They're not owned by people like George Lucas, who are trying to get money and trying to, as an artist, sure, they want to make money, of course, but they're trying to make something unique. It's not owned by a corporation that now is and bidding and going, here we go, here we go, here we go. What's really interesting, I think why I love the MCU so much, is it's the perfect distillation in my mind of how franchises should be run. Sure, it's owned by Disney, but Disney has given Kevin Feige, a man who, lest we not forget, produced 13 Marvel films before he worked on the MCU. And he worked in a producing capacity on 13 movies in the before the MCU started. So he knows what's up. He saw what worked and what didn't work. He knows how to collaborate. So to me, the MCU is the perfectly run, corporately owned franchise, because you have the overlords at Disney overseeing it all, but then you have an individual in Kevin Feige. You have a visionary, a mastermind who knows how to do this, and he finds great collaborators. And I think all of our great franchises need that in order to function. Now, Star Wars, I think what's really interesting, I'm hoping that The Mandalorian will have that. The problem is, and Kathleen Kennedy tried to be that. She tried to make everyone. Kathleen Kennedy is one of her reputation and her credits are impeccable. She's unassailable, but she was trying to find people that could work within that structure, and it didn't always work out for her because she wasn't used to the fact that the filmmakers that she entrusted would have a problem doing what they were doing. She was going to new and upcoming filmmakers, and it didn't always work out. But I think all of these franchises need someone like Kevin Feige. They need working creative producers who then can take the reins of the franchise as a whole and bring to bear what they've learned in the trenches and continue on. Certainly Star Trek needs that. I don't have much faith. I've heard so much about the turmoil behind the scenes of the Picard show, both from people inside and outside the industry, because they don't have a visionary. And the people that are trying to do this, again, are trying to change Star Trek. They're trying to change it and shape it in their own image, and it's not working. Ultimately, it's not working. You're getting people that are liking these things, but they don't resonate. They're not going to. It's in one ear and out the other. And I think that's where we're at. That's where we're at with. Sometimes it's working, like with the MCU. Sometimes it's not, like with Star Trek, and sometimes it's hit and miss, like with Star Wars. But what we need to do as fans, I mean, Willow wrote this letter. I mean, her parents were right. In her case, she's now going to be a molecular biologist. Probably she's going to make them proud, but now she's got her own life, so she can play the video game she wants. I wanted to know, she didn't answer this question in the actual chat, but does she have an Xbox and does she have a PlayStation? And is she still playing these games? I know she says she doesn't have enough time. She's probably very dedicated to her job and her PhD candidacy, which I'm sure she will come through with flying colors. But ultimately, I'm of the belief that properly applied, fandom is a great thing. It's a great thing. But again, it requires a balance. It requires a balance in people's lives. And I think that might be hard to do. Heck, when I get a new book I want to read, it's like, oh, I toss everything aside and I'll tear through it. I mean, I sit down, I'll have a meal, I'll stay in my case, the bathroom door was always banged on in my house, like Willow was talking about. Now, when I was a kid, the bathroom was the most well-lit room in the house and no one bothered you. So when I was like 8, 9, and 10, I could get an hour on my bedtime, because bedtime might have been 9 o'clock. Well, I could go sit in the bathroom and read until the CBS Radio Mystery Theater came on at 10:07 on Cairo in Seattle, I had to listen to CBS Radio Mystery Theater. But then as I got older, when I became a teenager, then it was my mom banging on the door going, what are you doing in there? I should have just said, Mom, come on, I'm masturbating. It's fantastic. Leave me alone. But I wasn't. I was actually reading books. Nothing had changed. And to this day, I go into the bathroom for a long time. There's always reading material in there. I go in at night. It's quiet. The girls aren't running around. I don't have to worry about someone jumping in. But the bathroom is still the most well-lit room in the house. It's quiet and no one bothers you. So it's fantastic. But anyway, to answer my own question, I think fandom is beneficial. I don't think it's a waste of time. In my own life, I mean, I think it's maybe if I concentrated less on my fandom and more on my career, I'd be further along. But then again, I've got to do a lot of interesting things. While I might not be a household name when it comes to filmmaking, and I might not, I've only directed one movie and produced a few other movies and worked on some shows. And I'm very proud of all the things that I've done. And sure, it would have been nice to have had my film career turn out like Jon Favreau's or Kevin Smith's or something. But it didn't. But that doesn't mean I'm not still here working away, which I am. And doing all kinds of things, diversifying. But I think fandom is a good thing, perhaps the best of things, as Andy Dufresne would say in The Shawshank Redemption. So what do you guys think? What do you think? I'm going to go to this chat and see what is up. Celadon Sound is here, man. I haven't seen you in a while. How are you, sir? Yo, Rob, just to let you know, I tune in a lot. Just you're often on the TV while I'm busy, so I can't always get involved in the chats. Well, thank you very much, sir. Thank you again for your support. I very much appreciate that. Let's see who else is here. We shall see. Mark C is here. Mark C says, Rob, I sent you a DM giving my theory on what is happening to our favorite properties. Sadly, I missed typing a word, but the idea is still there. Please read. I will do just that. Jay-Z is here. Thank you, Willow Yang, for sharing your incredible stories. And I, too, thank you, Willow, for sharing your incredible stories. You just make me look better. I get to read these great letters you write, and it just makes me look better because you send them to me. I mean, you could send them to someone else, but you don't. And maybe you do. I don't know. But I appreciate the fact that you do send them to me, and they're so thoughtful. And I mean, you're not just tossing them off. They're great letters, and I always learn something. And same is true of Norman Lau. So thank you guys for writing those. It's great. JC says, Samir Tesfai says, hi, RMB. Just wanted to say I enjoy your show. You're a cool cat, brother. Also, justice for Han, my man. Yes, justice for Han. Han will one day achieve justice. Probably not in Hobbs and Shaw, but we can still hope. Maybe there's a mention. Somebody's got to pay homage to Han Solo. Not the Han Solo, Han Soul, like the city soul. Oh, Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, I think you missed my super chat yesterday. I'm sorry. But PI primary investigator, PI primary. Oh, okay. PI is primary investigator. Okay. AKA the boss. I get it. And F2P is, free to play. See, free to play. That's good to know. Free to play. I should know that. How come I didn't know that? I should know that. Mark C says, continued for my previous super chat and DM. Most online trolls are simply fighting to keep or return the properties to the point where they can be fans again. Okay. I I've got something to say about that. I'm going to come back to that. Let me read Dieter Bastian's here, all the way from Germany. Dude, you get that Alfred, what is it, the Psycho box set? I got to order that stuff, that Blu-ray Psycho box set from Germany. I need that. Got to get some cash, order that up. Dieter says, Dieter Bastian says, good evening, Rob. You discussed the starting time of movies in theaters with John today. I did. Well, Rob, you would be furious in Germany. They always play commercials and never, ever start at the announced time. The Germans don't start at the announced time? Like, what is that? Come on. I thought that always, or is that the Swiss that always start on time? Well, that's not good. I wouldn't like that. You know, that wouldn't be a good. So I'm going to see what Mark C has to say. I'm going to go. I think I'm going to have to like get my Twitter code, but I'm going to go back to Twitter, or maybe not. Yeah, because I restarted the computer, so I have to go back. Where's my phone? I don't know where my phone went. Where did it go? Oh, it's in my pocket. So here, hang on. But yes, that is. I think that's that would bum me out if I was in a theater and you have to watch a bunch of commercials. I wouldn't dig it. Okay, hang on. Let's see what he says. 015. What does Mark C? What did he send me? Let's see. Okay, here it is. Social media groups push to get IPs that have long-standing fandoms to change so they are more progressive. Many companies support such change either because of personal belief or because they believe changing the product will attract a younger demographic of fans. Sadly, the groups seem interested in change but don't have any more in the properties than before. So we get IPs that cut loose their old fandom and do not grab a new one. Now, nobody's a fan. That's actually pretty interesting. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but in this day and age, I mean, for instance, oh, Gilbert, why is Gilbert getting up? In this day and age, I think that the problem is now these fandoms have gone global. If you look at, like when I was a fan of Marvel Comics, there were no Marvel Comics movies. And when there were, you had the Incredible Hulk TV show. And then when that went off the air and they started doing Incredible Hulk TV movies, look at the Thor we got. You know, all that stuff was kind of goofy. Now the MCU is a global phenomenon. And I think what franchises are trying to do is they're trying to make the most money possible. And another thing is what's different is that, like, for instance, in the case of Star Wars was purchased by Disney, a company that is, by definition, looking to spread out globally and find properties and IPs that they can exploit across a global platform. Now, I don't think that Disney has necessarily a progressive agenda. Like, again, the progressive left scares the hell out of me, and I should be a progressive leftist. I am not. I'm becoming increasingly disillusioned with the left. I saw a really interesting article. I don't want to get totally political here, but the police force in Portland, Oregon is diminishing. 33% of their police force is going to be gone in the coming months because they've completely allowed a progressive agenda to take over the city. And the police have been seen as the enemy, and no one stepped in. And I mean, frankly, what's happening to Portland and what's happening in San Francisco and what's already happened in San Francisco and Seattle is a real shame, because in this desire to help people and be progressive and allow people to live and let live, they are undermining the very fabric of our cities, and that's not good either. But what's happened with I don't necessarily think, like, there's all these people, this backlash when people start talking about, oh, Captain Marvel is sexist and all that, or it's got this agenda. It really doesn't. I mean, they're thinking, their corporate think is like, how do we appeal to the greatest number of fans that are out there? And half our population, a little more than half, are females, and the MCU did not provide a female-led, other than Black Widow. There was no, and Black Widow has a dark past, man. Black Widow is not a Disney princess. And what they needed was the superhero equivalent. So they come out with Captain Marvel. And I'll tell you, what I was always saying is that you've got a female audience, you've got mothers and daughters and grandmothers going to the theater to see a female superhero. I really enjoyed Captain Marvel. As I've said, I thought it was more of an indie superhero movie. But there's all these again, the backlash, Captain Marvel, she's not a traditional, say, male-centered hero, or nor did she act. I mean, she was more interested in her inner being, her inner self, which she didn't know. Who was she? She didn't know. It's not like, look at Stephen Strange. Who didn't want to be Stephen Strange the way he's portrayed in the beginning of Doctor Strange? He knows all forms of pop music. He drives hot cars. He's totally egotistical. He's rich. Everyone loves him. Women love him. The world loves him. I mean, he's a swaggering, hanging dick. I mean, Stephen Strange was a dude that we can all like, I want to be that guy. But he was an ass, and I don't think that the female audience, unless they're big Benedict Cumberbatch fans, there was a lot of people that the character of Stephen Strange was probably off-putting to. If you're like an 8-year-old girl and you watch Doctor Strange, I'm not saying 8-year-old girls won't watch it, but the character is portrayed in the beginning of that movie before he begins his quest and eventually becomes master of mysticism. The guy was a dick, and what Disney wants to do is they want to appeal to the widest possible audience. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Half the population, more than half the population on this planet are women. And, it's about time that females can have a movie, they can have superheroes. I mean, I as a white dude, I've been getting superheroes my whole life, and women who've liked comic books, who like superheroes, they've got a few characters, but they don't have a lot of characters to love. I mean, now we've got Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, but what about the X-Men? I mean, we saw them, but you ask comic book girl 19 what she thinks of the X-Men on screen as currently portrayed. She's going to give you a mouthful. By the way, I do recommend her History of Comic Book series. She actually does a really good job. I mean, she's pretty reactionary. I disagree with her a lot about the cinematic universe of the X-Men, but what we're getting now is these corporations, they're not trying to turn what they're trying to do is appeal to the widest number of people across the planet. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because appealing to people across the planet, appealing to women, appealing to marginalized people, minorities, does not mean they're not going to give you great stories. What I want are great stories well told. I am not getting that with Star Trek Discovery. I think and I don't think that they're serving a progressive agenda either. I really don't. I mean, the fact that Star Trek has always had somewhat of a progressive agenda, but they told great stories first. You can have a progressive agenda, but Twilight Zone, even Stanley Kubrick, his progressive agenda was that he liked humanity and he didn't want to see humanity destroy itself. So he gets accused of being a misanthrope and all these things, but no, he's trying to use irony and darkness, and he's trying to show you how not to be by showing you the foibles of characters and what they're doing. And I think that's how you make interesting characters. But there's so many people, it's so weird that they get all reactionary and crazy. But anyway, just a thought. Jay-Z sent me another question. Mr. Burnett, what are your thoughts on Godzilla 2, King of the Monsters? My thoughts are I'm basically walking around with a big erection. Well, not as big as I'd like, but I can't wait to see Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It makes me feel like I'm a little kid. I'm a huge kaiju fan, and the fact that they brought back my favorite monsters, Ghidorah or Musarag, Gira, and Rodan. I mean, I love these movies. Rodan is my favorite Toho monster movie. My favorite Godzilla movie is Monster Zero, Godzilla versus Monster Zero. But to see a movie with all the budget that Hollywood can muster, to see Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, Ghidorah in one movie, bring it on. I cannot wait. How can it be king when they're missing the best monster, Gamera? But the thing is, Gamera is owned by a different company. Gamera is, I think, Toei, whereas the other monsters, the other kaiju, are Toho. So that's why Gamera can't be in. Although I'm a fan of Gamera. And over the last 20 years, we've got some pretty good Gamera movies. So, but I'm a huge fan. Huge fan. I cannot wait. My dream would be to see Pacific Rim cross over with Godzilla. Wouldn't that be the greatest thing ever? I'd love that. Anthony Gonzalez says, DS9's What We Leave Behind just released a new trailer for the doc today. It's glorious. I saw that. For those of you who don't know, Ira Steven Behr, he was basically the mastermind of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He famously started work on Star Trek in the third season of TNG. I interviewed him extensively for the TNG documentaries that we did that are on the Blu-rays that you can see. He's great. He spearheaded this effort to get a DS9 documentary because they're not remastering the series. They did convince CBS to let them remaster some footage, which looks great. Trailer went up today. It's actually gonna play in theaters. Shout Factory picked it up. Good on Shout Factory for doing so. It was crowdfunded. They spent a lot of time making it great, and I can't wait to see it. Tickets are on sale at Fathom Events. I mean, I think you can get them at Fandango. Can't wait to see it. I will be buying my tickets today. So that is awesome. And the trailer is great. It looks great. They talked to everyone. I know they had some trouble to get certain people to be in it, but man, does it look good. So I'm excited, very excited. Very, very excited. So I'm glad that, yes, that you saw that. Hassan Chavez just sent me a super chat. Thank you, Hassan. I really appreciate that support for the station. That's very awesome. You didn't ask a question, though. Jonathan Peck says, you just talked about fandom. I was wondering, what do you think of the internet fandom of Shrek? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know much about the internet fandom of Shrek. I would assume that are they good fans? I mean, doesn't everyone like Shrek? I hope so. I don't know if there's a bad thing or not. So I don't know. I've got to look into it. Is it like Bronies? Does Shrek have a fandom like that? I don't know. I have to look into that. Fen War is back again with his hello from New York. See, these are the kind of things I'm loving in these chats. I love when people start doing their thing. I love when I hear from Seattle about the Mariners games, but I like when Fen War comes in and says, greetings from New York. I imagine you saying it like Don Pardo. Something like that. Gregory Smith says, Gregory Smith's here. By the way, Greg Smith and I are going to be at WenCon in Wenatchee, Washington this weekend. Greg is bringing out Priscilla, Queen of the Glacier that he built. He's also bringing his 1-to-1 scale land speeder. And I hear they're bringing, I don't think he might have helped make it, but I don't know. He's bringing a full-size Tauntaun as well. They're all going to be on display Saturday, the 13th of April at WenCon. Come say hello to us. I'm doing 2 panels, one on Star Trek and one on Star Trek versus Star Wars, and I think one on Avengers, I believe. Come join us, as the Evil Dead would say. It should be fun. Silva Surfa says, I stopped collecting comics until my kids showed interest. Now I teach them to read with my now growing collection. See, that's dope. I don't have kids myself, unfortunately, but I would have done that. I mean, my long boxes, 65 long boxes of comics, all mostly from the 80s and 90s. I try to get rid of them. If you guys want anything, and I'm selling shit for $1 a piece. I want to get rid of it all. I have a lot. Hey, Norman Lau is here. He says, we did meet through the Axonar Project, Rob, but we've shared so much more fandom fun since then. It's true, Norman, we have. And now I've got you addicted to UFO, which you should be. Jerry Anderson's UFO is one of my favorite things in the world. I love it. Silva Surfer also says, I should say Silva Surfer. Good parents let their kids be mega dorks. I agree. I mean, my parents did. Of course, I wasn't a dork. I was always cool. Come on. Real Girl 26 says, Will Yang, I don't plan on having children either, but I sure will spoil my nephews. Well, okay. That's good. Spoil your nephews. That's good. It's funny. I was reading about in Japan, not only is the birth rate plummeting, like last year, there weren't even 1 million people born in Japan. It was like 900 and something thousand. And there's like more virgins in Japan into their 20s and 30s than ever before, like some enormous part of the population, 25%. I mean, I don't understand. You live in Japan. How can you keep your hands off Japanese girls? I don't know. But actually, I do know, because if I lived in Japan, if I grew up in Japan, I would be at their toy stores all the time buying die-cast Soul of Chogokin, die-cast metal super robots, Gundam robots, and I'd be probably buying model kits of Space Battleship Yamato, because those 2202 kits are great. I haven't got any 2202 kits, but man, there's a lot of good ones. So I understand if I live in Japan, I'd probably not get out much either. But it's scary to read those statistics. And I think that's kind of happening here. Let's see. Norman Lau says, yes, the Zocalo cast on Facebook. It's okay. Let me recommend Norman Lau, the biggest Babylon 5 fan I know. He has on Facebook a Babylon 5 podcast called the Zocalo Cast. It's on Facebook. I highly recommend it. Norman hosts it. And see, this is another thing about the Post-Geek Singularity community. I like the fact that you guys are all doing, you don't have to. If you don't, I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying it's cool when people like me, I just started this chat. I'm just a fan. Like I could have done this a long time ago. John Schnepp used to tell me to do it all the time, and people just said, finally, go do it. And I started doing this chat, and now I'm building this community. But I love it when you guys are sending me pictures and things, and your fandom. You're all actively involved in some kind of fandom. But then Willow Yang sends me a cool picture or this explanation of how she's growing stuff in E. coli. It scares the hell out of me, but it's still pretty cool. So I didn't know I was a fan of crazy diseases, although that's not true. If I could be a doctor and work anywhere, I'd like to work in the hot zone at the Centers for Disease Control. Like I'd go. I have my friend Frank, who's crazy good. He went to Sierra Leone when there was an Ebola outbreak and shot documentary footage there. I'm like, when he came back to Arizona, he made the news because the Arizonans didn't want him in the state, even though he'd been quarantined. So man, anybody who's working with infectious diseases of any kind, they're my hero. So I love that stuff. Robot Shlomo says, where are all those parents that were so agreeable regarding their kids' interests? All my parents ever said to me was, go to work. Well, from my perspective, I had to go to work because I needed, as I said, my parents wouldn't buy me everything. They buy me books from the Sci-Fi Book Club, but if I blank videotapes were like $30 a pop when they first started, man, I had a paper route. I did yard work. I worked at a frame store. I learned how to frame pictures, by the way, and cut glass and all that. When I was, 13, 14, 15, I needed the money to support my interests. I mean, model kits to buy, and I was always working. You got to keep working because I needed money. Brian Eng says, Coke is bubbly Pepsi. Coke is bubbly. Pepsi is super sweet. Yeah, I'm not a Pepsi fan. I got to tell you, Caesar's Palace, the one thing wrong with Caesar's Palace is they only serve Pepsi products. You can't get Diet Coke there, not even in the stores. I understand it. That's probably a lot of money that they make from that team up. I understand, but it just diminished my stay at Caesar's, and I loved Caesar's. I think it's great. Craig Smith says Pepsi's fruitier. Vesna's here all the way from Sarajevo. I don't know what Vesna says, me neither, but Vesna, love it when Vesna's here. And Joseph also from her neck of the woods. Like, I feel like I need to, once, if I get enough super chats, I got to start saving it all up to go on the international Robservations tour. And my first stop, it's going to be mostly Irish based. I'm going to Ireland. I'm going to Sweden to see Stubble McShave. And I'm going to go to the Balkans. I want to go hang out in Sarajevo. I've never been to Sarajevo with Vesna, like broadcast from her house if she's got good internet connection. I'll just invite myself over, set up the computer and make her be on these chats with me. But I fear, like, she talks about how small she is. She sent me a picture of herself when she was a little girl standing next to a fence, and she says, I'm like, this fence is 3 feet tall, and she's like below that. It makes me think of Willow. I mean, it's funny, the movie Willow, but now I think of Willow Yang. And sometimes I think Willow, and then I think of her cousin, Yang. It's crazy. It's crazy what's happening to me on these chats. Vesna says, soda always makes me go to the bathroom. That's why I only drink it at home. Ha, ha, ha. Well, it is Coke's like a diuretic, right? Taylor M says, Jennifer Jones, mine too. My folks were divorced, but both of them loved sci-fi, especially Star Trek. I remember watching Aliens with my mom when it came out on VHS. Lots of screams from both of us. That's awesome. I love hearing that story. Willow Yang says, to Vesna, I don't like soda that much these days because the bubbles sometimes give me cramps. So do you guys not like, I love sparkling water. It's one of my favorite things. Like, if I can't drink alcoholic beverages because I'm off the alcohol for a while, I'll drink sparkling water. It's the best. I love sparkling water. Let's see. Doshi is here. Doshi says, I can't believe you don't like Shazam. Still love you. No. I don't dislike Shazam. I just didn't think it was that great. I love the character. I love a lot of what was going in it. I just felt it was a little dumbed down. I expected it to be more sophisticated and a little bit more clever. That's all. Brad Brickley is here. Brad says, love the Post-Geek Singularity, yours and others' insights. Comics and sci-fi fan all my life. I feel like I come away with new perspectives of familiar subjects after every chat. Hope to meet up Saturday. You know what, Brad? Thank you for saying that. That nothing makes me happier, except a new Hot Toy figure, than hearing somebody say that. because that's what this is all about. Like if I felt I was talking into a vacuum and like nobody was here, that would be any fun? I mean, what's the fun in that? I mean, it's been great watching this community develop and see what people have to say and getting the letters I'm getting at the Burnettwork.net and all this stuff. I'm glad to hear you say that because I get perspectives. I love like Mark C comes in and he's always saying interesting things. And now I like the fact that people can send me longer adjuncts to their super chats or things in real time on Twitter because they can write more. I didn't know. Mugen 008 says, R&B, tell us about your cigar smuggling days. Well, Seymour Cassell, a great actor who was on an episode of Star Trek, by the way, who is also, I believe he was Jason Schwartzman's father in Rushmore. I'm not sure. I want to, but Seymour Cassell began acting in the 50s. He worked with John Cassavetes, passed away. He died of Alzheimer's. And I met him in Sigis in 1998. He was there. He was a guest there. What a hilarious dude. He was one of the greats. He loved women. He loved his cigars. And he made me smuggle Cuban cigars back from Spain. I got them through customs for him. So yeah, we were together at that film. One of the great things about going to film festivals, one of the byproducts that I love so much is when you have a movie at a film festival, you're a peer. You're a peer with everybody there of some of your heroes. When I first showed Free Enterprise at the Hawaii International Film Festival, Quentin Tarantino sat right in front of me. And at the after party, we were at this crazy treehouse. It was so amazing. Somebody lived in this gigantic treehouse. It was on Oahu. I don't know if it's still there. This was 20 years ago. But, he cornered me at the party and we talked, me and Quentin broed down for 3 hours talking. But he wanted to know everything there was to know about Free Enterprise, which was great. But that's how I got to meet Seymour Cassell and smuggle cigars back for him. He brought his own too. It wasn't like I was the only one. He was smuggling them back himself, but he wanted more. This is when Cuban cigars, I think, can you get Cuban cigars now? I think you can, right? David Cabrera is here. He says, hi, Rob and all. Well, hello, David Cabrera. Nola Nerd is here. R&B loved the video with Endgame here. I wonder what John Schnepp's opinion would be. What do you think he would say? I cherish y'all's conversations. They got me through a divorce. Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. John would have liked hearing that. John would have been just ecstatic. For those of you who don't know, I did a show. I knew John Schnepp for almost 20 years. I did a show with him on Collider for 3.5 years called Collider Heroes. It was weekly and then it was daily. And we talked science fiction. We talked superhero movie news and TV show news. And it was great. And John he called our fans and each other, we were sweaties. Because you're always at convention. Look, it's Comic-Con. You want to know what a sweaty is? Just go to Comic-Con and walk the floor. Everybody's a sweaty. So he called everyone sweaties, and that was always fun. But I think John would be over the moon. I think he'd be so excited. Look, I sat next to him at Infinity War, and we were like, 2 6-year-old kids having cotton candy for the first time at the county fair. We were that hyped up, and I think John would have just absolutely been over the moon with where we're at right now. I think really it would be amazing. Doshi says, Doshi, did you hear that? I guess Doshi's name, Gilbert likes to hear that name. Doshi says he's going to meet Zachary Levi next month. Will tell us how it is. Say hello to Zach for me. What was that about? Yo, hey, buddy. Yo, come here, Gilbert. Wow, what noise are you making? Oh, there's people here. Gilbert doesn't know. That's why. Zoe Trope is back. There she is. She says hello. But when she brings home friends from school and Gilbert doesn't know them, Gilbert goes into attack mode. He actually doesn't attack anybody. He just needs to know who's here. Celadon Sound says sparkling water is the one. Like Neo. Celadon Sound also says, don't forget to check out Halt and Catch Fire, man. Everyone is telling me about Halt and Catch Fire, which I need to look at. Dieter Bastian is here again. Hey, Rob, have you seen the Nebula figure from Hot Toys? Yo, what's up, son? I pre-ordered that. I think I had to pay a $20 fee, and it's not coming out till 2020. This is the problem with Hot Toys figures. Can I just tell you guys? Like, they announce them, they put them out for pre-order, and then it's like a year and a half before they show up. Now, I know, but I might be dead. You never know. And then it'll never even arrive because the pre-order will never get paid off. And by the way, for those of you who think you can also do payment plans, it's like buying a car for some of these figures. If you go to sideshowtoy.com, Sideshow Collectibles, Sideshow Toys is the American distributor for Hot Toys. So I suggest if you want to get a hot toy, you know, they can put you on a payment plan. Don't be embarrassed. I've been on payment plans for hot toys before. Sometimes it's like $17 a month. You never know, depending on what you're buying. It's pretty good. And then when you're done paying it off, they'll send it to you. But you can do it that way. And when you're poor, you know. So yes, I have seen the Nebula figure from Hot Toys, Dieter. And believe me, it's not so bad that movies don't start at their announced time, because you wouldn't believe how many people are coming in late. Man, pet peeve. You know, I think they should give you paintball guns. So when people come into movies late, you can shoot them. Maybe not in the face, but shoot them anyway. Because I would do that. Pleasant Valley Picker Canada says, greatest number does not long-term fans. New fans will get bored with the geek bandwagon in a few years and hop off. Old fans will be left too. Yeah, I think that's true. I think old fans will stick around. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I found my fandom ebb and flow. I mean, look, I've always been a lifelong Star Trek fan, but part of what I loved about Star Trek was each new Star Trek, how it was caressed into the timeline. And I have no use for Star Trek Discovery because it's clearly not a part of Star Trek canon. You can't reconcile it at all. So looking back on all my old technical manuals and all, it just doesn't fit. As a matter of fact, it ruins all of those things because it doesn't fit, because it's disrupted the timeline. So you go back and you read the Akuta Star Trek Encyclopedia, and then where's Discovery going to fit in any of this? It doesn't work. I mean, that's one of the great things about the Star Trek fandom that I had for 40 years, is that they kept adding to it and would add to the tapestry of it. Discovery doesn't fit in any of that. Oh, man, listen to that, Gilbert. By the way, Gilbert never barks at anybody. He's not a mean dog. Are you, buddy? No. You're a good boy, right? Right, buddy? Yeah, look at that guy. How can you not love him? He just doesn't like it when people aren't here that he doesn't know. Come here. You want to come up? Okay. You don't have to come up. You want to come up? Come here. All right. Can't get him to visit you today. What can I do? Mark Balam says, I know that the far left crowd didn't kill a woman with a car driving into a crowd. I know that the far left didn't kill a woman with a car driving into a crowd. Come here, buddy. Come here. Come here, dude. Come here. Come on up. Come on up. Come on up. You want to come up? Okay. He doesn't want to come up. That's true. That's true, but it's only a matter of time. You know, they'll disrupt your colleges instead. They might not kill you, but they'll make sure that your college will change forever, like they did with mine at the Evergreen State College. But yeah, I can't get into that kind of political debate here. I want to keep it non-acrimonious, unless it refers to fandom. Dan V900 says Captain Marvel is not an indie movie in any way, and it wasn't filmed like one either. Doctor Strange is a mediocre film, and the character was a lot better in Infinity War. It wasn't memorable. Well, now hang on. I know that about Captain Marvel, but you have two directors that made their bones in indie film, and they brought their indie sensibility to Captain Marvel. What I thought was interesting about Captain Marvel was the different relationships that she worked through over the course of the movie helped her come to grips with who she was. And I thought that was a very indie approach to a superhero movie. And the way it was done, I thought it was pretty cool. And I don't think Doctor Strange is a mediocre film at all. I thought I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, sure, it had a lot of their traditional origin elements in it, but I like Doctor Strange. Vesna says she loves Doctor Strange and it's her favorite comic book character. But yeah, I mean, see, here's the thing. When I understand that Captain Marvel wasn't an indie movie in any way, but the directors come from indie filmmaking. So they brought their indie film sensibility to the character. And when you say that Doctor Strange is a mediocre film, you know, when you come out and say that, I liked it. And I don't think it was a mediocre film in any way, shape, or form. I think Doctor Strange was a very difficult property to adapt. And, you know, the visuals are really cool in that movie. And I think they did a lot of really neat stuff. And that film probably is a lot better than it had any right of being, you know, and I thought it was cool. And I agree with you 100%, though. I thought Doctor Strange was way better in Infinity War. I thought the one weakness that I thought Doctor Strange had was he went from being Stephen Strange to Doctor Strange rather quickly. Like, I mean, I know they have to get him into the cloak and the costume soon, but that would have been something I would have shown at the very end of the movie if I'd made it. But you can't do that when you're making a franchise property. You you'll also have to work within the confines of what they're trying to do. But I liked it. You know who loved it? John Schnepp loved Doctor Strange because he never thought he would see that. Willow Yang says, Matt Limpicki, I actually had a classmate also named Yang in high school, and the teachers always thought we were related. Isn't that funny? You know, that's like going to, I imagine you go to China and everybody thinks that people named Smith are related or Johns or something like that. Let's see. I'm zipping around here. Crixus Maximus is here. Dude, there was no reason to resurrect a certain character on Star Trek Discovery in an utterly stupid way, except to serve a progressive agenda and appease a certain demographic. At least Spock's made sense. Look, I agree. I understand appease. First of all, it undermines death, and that's bad. I think what the mycellular network, not only can you go anywhere in the universe, but it also brings back dead people. It's the stupidest shit ever. I hate it so much. It's all magic gobbledygook. Taylor M says, great call on Kubrick, Rob, all the way up to Eyes Wide Shut. He pointed out so many character flaws that it led to the end of a marriage because of Tom and Nicole acting together. Yes, it did. But I think their marriage was kind of doomed to begin with in a way. Neil McDaniel says, it's okay to start out as a dick as part of a hero's journey. Captain Marvel seemed perfect from the start. Well, maybe she was. I mean, you know, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, she was a fighter pilot. She like Hal Jordan, you know, the way that she was portrayed. I don't have a problem with that. But she didn't know who she was, and her journey was rediscovering the person that she'd lost, which was herself. And I thought that was interesting. What's interesting about that is it's internal. You know, I think what was going on, whereas all these journeys are internal, we get more of an externalization from them. And in the middle of Captain Marvel, she goes back home to Louisiana and hangs out with her friend and her friend's daughter. I don't think that's traditionally what people want to see in comic book movies, unless it's in the middle of Age of Ultron, in which case it was interesting. But I liked all that. I mean, I don't mind that in my comic book movies. I think a lot of people, I understand that people don't. I mean, I get that. Matt Limpicki says, people thought that me and my sister were twins as we were born a year apart. Laughed my ass off. I don't know what you're referring to, but I get that. That's pretty funny. Aaron Johnson says, hey, Rob, I just made a letter. It's involving falling down and if aged enough for a modern telling. It's involving falling down and if it's aged enough for modern. Oh, you're asking about that. You mean remaking Falling Down? I think Falling Down could get remade and be epic in this era. I think absolutely. I'd love to make the fan version of Falling Down. What is the Joker or Falling Down version of toxic fandom and what it does to you? I mean, who knows? Willow Yang says, Terry Flynn, I remember reading an article mentioning some Asian. It just jumped. When people do that, I got to find your letter again. That sounded interesting. Sometimes it happens. Willow, I got to come back to that. Alan Finley says, why does the Star Trek unaired pilot The Cage always end up on the season 3 box set instead of the first episode of the season 1 box set? Well, I'll tell you why, Alan. Because the unepisode pilot for The Cage was never even seen until the 80s. Gene Roddenberry would show it at conventions. I actually saw it at the Seattle used to have a sci-fi expo, and Gene Roddenberry came and brought it to that. And then he brought it just on a lecture tour. So the reason it's included on the season 3 discs is it's usually considered an extra because famously The Cage was repurposed in the Menageries part 1 and 2, the Menagerie episodes 1 and 2. But it's considered an extra. And, you know, for the longest time when The Cage first appeared, some of it was in black and white. The stuff that they didn't use in the Menagerie. And then they found the trims, they found the color trims, and they put it out later, which was pretty cool. But yeah. Dan V900 says, the Russos just explained why Carol is glammed up for Endgame. She shot her scenes for Endgame first, which you must know, and it was her decision. The fake controversy is now over. Yes, thank God. I think it's cool they got to it's going to be different. It'll be different, which I think is good. I think is a good thing. Let's see. I want to find what Willow said, but I can't find it. I'm jumping around. I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Willow Yang says, Terry Flynn, I remember reading an article mentioning some Asian Godzilla porn parody. Is that the one you're referring to? If there is an Asian Godzilla porn parody, I have no doubt that Terry Flynn has either seen it or knows where to get it, which is why I love him. So yes. Let's see. Chad Crypto says, I saw that land speeder at Jet City Comic Show, even photographed it. Good work. Yes, I can't wait. I think everybody should come see it because it's awesome. It's also, you can see it in the first episode of Robservations if you haven't watched it. It's on this channel. Norman Lau says, so last night I finished UFO. I cannot recommend the show more. It's one of the most unique and singular visions of narrative that I've ever seen. Yes, for those of you who don't know, UFO, which I did a Robservations chat on, it was a series that was made from 1969 to 1971. And it was by Jerry Anderson, who before then had made super marionette shows like Fireball XL5 and Supercar and Stingray and the Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and Joe 90. And he later went on to do famously the Terrahawks. And then he made UFO, and UFO later morphed into Space 1999 when the second season of UFO was going to be too expensive. Gilbert, stop that. Gilbert is eating my camera bag. It's one of my favorite things ever. It's dark, it's fatalistic, but it's great. I love it. You guys should all watch it. Crixus Maximus says the birth rate is plummeting, virgins proliferating. Hold my beer. Well, it's plummeting, not plummeting, but in the Western world, yes, it is, because people are becoming. I think you don't have to have a family anymore to live a fulfilling life. Those old modes of thinking are going away. And Mark Balam says, isn't it good that birth rates are dropping? The world can only hold a certain amount of people, animals, and plants. I agree. That's why Thanos was right. No, just kidding. But it made it compelling. Norman Lau says, Rob, being a fan of disaster movies, did you enjoy Outbreak? That movie theater scene where they breathed in all of Patrick Dempsey's sneeze particle molecules freaked me the F out. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Wolfgang Peterson, who's a kind of a powerhouse director. I'm a big fan of Wolfgang Peterson. He directed, of course, Das Boot, and he came and he directed movies like Air Force One. He made a pretty cool action thriller that Dustin Hoffman was in, because Dustin Hoffman, when you think action star, you think Dustin Hoffman, but they made Outbreak, and it's really interesting. If you read about Linda Opes was talking about, they wanted to make the book, the famous book, The Hot Zone, into a film, but Outbreak beat it to the punch. I loved Outbreak. But yeah, there's a scene where they show this horrible disease. It gets unleashed in a small town, and watching how it spreads to the town is great. And there's a scene in a movie theater where somebody coughs, and it isn't good. But I loved Outbreak. It's great. Although, again, they find that they cure the disease pretty quickly, but it's still, that movie kind of holds up. It's pretty good. And that was the first time I ever saw a fuel air bomb in the beginning of a movie, when they sterilize a town. It's pretty dope. So, I dig that. Movie Maniac 86 asks, hey Rob, have you seen Space Above and Beyond? I think that show is great and could be rebooted. Yes, I love Space Above and Beyond. I mean, that was this show that Morgan and Wong made after they left the X-Files. I like Space Above and Beyond. It didn't last very long. Great cast, cool aliens. They did that in the mid-90s, and that's when we were writing for Sci-Fi Universe, and they were big fans of Sci-Fi Universe and gave us the time of day. So I really like Space Above and Beyond. I love the fighters in that. I've always wanted to get a good plastic model of that. You can get resin kits, but I've always wanted a great model of those ships. Those are great. Angela Dashner says, happy birthday to your mom from IA. I will be at work. What is IA? Is that a state? You can watch it later, though. It's going to be pretty funny. I don't know what my mom's going to do on this chat, but who knows? Terry Flint says Willow is talking Godzilla porn, as one does. Doshi says, why does everyone call Discovery STD? True fans should know they never shorten with Star Trek in the title. Example, TNG, TOS, so Discovery is disc. It is disc. I think people just say STD because, we're all infants. At some point, we all just revert back to scatological infantile humor, and that's definitely one of them. Anthony Gonzalez says, welcome to Rylos, my boy. Well, Norman Lau loves hearing that. Norman Lau will tell you what Rylos is, because he's the biggest Last Starfighter fan there is in the world. Movie Maniac 86 sent me a super chat, and which I want to thank him for, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. My director from Tango Shalom keeps calling me. They're in a sound thing, so I must call them back. Celadon Sound says, Willow Yang, I went to a screening of his Superman What Happened film and got to chat with him about making it. I've always cherished that. I will always cherish that. That's awesome. Movie Maniac 86 sent me another super chat. Thank you for that. Fergal Kelly is here. Heads up, my town, Port Louise. Is it Port Louise? Is pronounced Port. Oh, well, here you go. Heads up, my hometown is pronounced Port Leish. Oh, Port Leish. Port Leish. Port Leish. Port Leish. Ennis is pronounced Ennis. Both said fast. Ennis. So Garth Ennis. All right, Garth Ennis and Port Leish. I love it. Man, I got to get an Irish accent. That's my favorite accent. Irish women with red hair, and I got to get an Irish accent. Port Leish. See, there you go. Port Leish. I like that. And Ennis. See, I learn something new every day. Candy Van Man says a Silver Surfer hot toy. That'd be kind of dope. I wouldn't mind that. Gilbert is really eating my camera bag, and I got to call my director back. AJ Lancaster says, my divorced parents hated sci-fi, discovered Trek with Next Generation on the TV in my bedroom, and found Star Wars on TNT. First one I watched was Jedi. Amazing. That's good. You found it. It's good that you did. Vesta says, I still remember Schnepp's rant about Transformers and the Aunt May movie. It was hilarious. It truly was hilarious. Bozo the Clown says, did Quentin mention wanting to do Trek at the Free Enterprise premiere? He did not. He had Can with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood might talk his Trek there. I think he might. He might. Mike Bodden says, Gilbert is under siege. All paws on deck. Harry Pothole says, I think Schnepp would have loved Shazam, especially Mr. Mind. He would have loved seeing Mr. Mind at the end of Shazam. He would have loved that. But you know what? Even that, I know they show you this one shot of Mr. Mind and then they show kind of from behind, then in front, but they don't linger on it unless you knew what you were looking at. It was kind of a bummer. Real Girl 26 says, Schnepp was a great guy. Wish I could have met him. He was a great guy, and you should have met him. He was awesome. Kids, I'm going to cut this short today because I'm getting calls from work, and I need to answer those calls. But listen, I want to thank Willow and Norman for their letters, and anybody who wants to write me, please, again, write me at theburnettwork.net. Go to the website. We're putting up stuff there all the time. I'm going to start a new gallery there. Again, I've got some pictures. People can send those to me as well. And remember, go to getluckytiger.com and write Alan Murphy, the CEO of Lucky Tiger, a letter. Tell him thanks for supporting me, and also tell him he's got to come on the 100th episode of Robservations. And also, if you write Alan Murphy, tell him this, that the Studs for Suds soap, it's been discontinued apparently. Tell him probably was discontinued for sales reasons. But I want to make it my mission to single-handedly bring Studs for Suds back, or Suds for Studs back, because it's too good to not be back. And they've got to go back to the original formula because it has to be exactly the way I like it. So go to, actually, Darren Doctorman got one of my good buddies, Darren, one of the Inglorious Trek experts, went and bought products at the Lucky Tiger, getluckytiger.com website. And apparently he really likes it. So that's good. He's tweeting pictures of it. So thank you to Lucky Tiger for sponsoring me, and all of you for being here and supporting the channel. And I can't believe we're getting into the 90th talk. And in 2 days, Nancy Burnett is going to be my first chat guest. Well, Dave Parker was a guest too, but that was in the beginning. I've done 90 of these. My mom, Nancy Burnett, for her 80th birthday, which is this April 11th, she's going to be 80. It's going to be on this show. So go easy on her, but ask her probing questions. She'll want to know. Keep them general. If you get specific and be like, how did you like Logan's run? She won't even remember. But I'll remind her that she liked it because Peter Ustinov had lots of cats. My mom is, to this day, a crazy cat lady. But I look forward to having her on the show. I hope you guys look forward to meeting her. Maybe you'll glean some insight into something about me, and you can tell me things about myself that I don't even know. You can see where I came from. And, I lived with her since I was a week old. She adopted me, so kudos to her for that. She was a great mom, and she was very supportive of my interests and indulged me the best she could. And remember, the Tooth Fairy did not give me money in my house. The Tooth Fairy brought me Mego action figures. And I think my mom, call me crazy, might have had something to do with that. So that's coming up on this Thursday. By the way, it's going to be a little later Here's my schedule for Thursday. Potentially, I fly into Seattle. We get there at 12:30. I'll have to get a bag because I'm taking a bag with me. I've got to go get a rental car there. And in Seattle, you actually have to get on a shuttle and they take you to the rental car place. So from the time you actually get off the plane, it's about 45 minutes. It's about another half-hour drive to my mom's house. So the soonest I'll be able to go live is 3 o'clock our time, Pacific time, probably 4. But I'll try and get, even if it's 3:30, I'll try and get on as soon as possible. So you people that live in Europe, I know it's going to be late, but you can see my mom live, Nancy Burnett live. If not, pick it up the next day. But anyway, I'm going to end this chat. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for the ongoing support. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring this chat to a close. I will be back on the John Campea Show on Wednesday tomorrow at 9 a.m. I will not be on his show on Thursday and Friday, but I will be broadcasting from Washington State. And on Saturday, I will be at WenCon in Wenatchee. And I'm going to also film another video with Greg, a final video with Priscilla, Queen of the Glacier. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, I've always been dropping those videos there first so you can see them. And I appreciate all the Patreon subscribers as well. So thanks for all your support, kids, gentle beings, kind people, non-binary people, aliens that might be watching this for perhaps techniques to invade, because that would be kind of cool. I bid you all I bid you all good afternoon. And as always, have a better day.